Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back everyone to the continuity of my lectures entitled An Ideal Arrangement, where we will continue to discuss the elements of good book design. Today I've prepared a presentation for all of you in which I've isolated some of the fundamental or basic principles that guide not only book design but also page design, book cover design, design as a whole. And I will take you through these principles one at a time. The first one, of course, is very simple and very fundamental, and that is the principle called unity. If you can see the slide on your screens, you will see some points that I have written about what and how unity matters to a good graphic design. Unity means that all the elements that inhabit a page, a space, the page could be for a poster, the page could be a spread in a book, it could even actually apply to product design. All the elements that inhabit the space on paper must look like they belong together. Nothing must seem accidental or random, and the entire design, therefore, is more important than every little bit that has been used. Therefore, the overall impression that we create on a page using the two elements I've mentioned in my first lecture, primarily those two elements, which were typography and space, together they must make sense, together they must seem as if they are deliberate, and they must convey an impression upon the mind. Sometimes to typography and to space we add pictures. All of it must come together to create an easily readable whole. The reader looking at the page, the reader looking at the object, the reader looking at the poster must get the impression that it has all been done by one person with one particular intention and to convey one particular message or one particular content. Unity, how do we achieve unity? We achieve unity in many ways. For example, if you are designing a book, you could choose, or even a poster, or even an album cover for a music product. You could establish unity by, say, using black and white photographs throughout. Similarity of elements helps establish unity. Either color photographs throughout, either two color fonts throughout, or just black, white and grey throughout. You could choose to have a color scheme. You could choose to work only with icons or clip art. You could choose to work only with photographs or only with line drawings. This, of course, refers to a design which requires visual treatment. Otherwise, as I have mentioned in my first lecture, another great way of achieving, and a very simple and easy way of achieving unity in a graphic design, especially in a book, is through the use of only 2 or 3 typefaces which convey different levels of text. It is important, having emphasized unity in such great detail, sometimes it is great to break it, sometimes it is good to have the odd unpredictable part of a design, sometimes it is nice when the reader flips the page to find a visual or some kind of typographic treatment that surprises them. This also helps the reader to remain interested in a book and not sort of get lulled with a treatment that they feel is boring and predictable. Unity is required so that the message you want to communicate comes out clear and strong, but you also need variety in the design to add interest, right? So, as a book designer, we often straddle a very thin line between maintaining the unity and trying to give some little spaces for unpredictability or a break in the pattern so that almost the reader doesn't quite know what is coming next. A good design will do two things, which is it will grab your attention through the variety, and then it must be able to be read and understood easily through unity. So the bursts of variety, especially when we are discussing a book cover, the bursts of difference, bursts of variety help to captivate that initial attention of the reader in a world where we are bombarded with visual design from all sides, whether it's static design in shops, on online shopping venues, or whether it's moving design through the films and the series that we're watching on the various online platforms that we are all accessing these days. We are constantly surrounded by static or moving images. So in the world of books in particular, it is very important that there be some visual hook, some visual variety, some visual difference that attracts the reader. But then what will prompt the reader to remain, to buy, to read that book is going to be the unity that gives them an idea of the space that they are inhabiting. They begin to recognize the markers. When they see a certain amount of space on the page, they say, yes, okay, this is a section break. When they see a certain typeface on the page, they recognize it as a heading. When they see a second slightly smaller typeface on the page, they can recognize it as a subheading, right? You indicate the structure of the book through the typographic treatment of the table of contents. So the room into which you pull them is then created through unity, but the window through which you attract their attention, that is where you use variety or diversity. Okay? Having explained unity, I would now like to take you into the next slide. Here I have for you a dust jacket layout for a book that is called The Radio Family. This book is by a German poet called Ingeborg Bachmann. She was known primarily for her poetry and some other I think possibly she has written a novel or two. But here, what was discovered fairly late is a sequence of plays, very interestingly, that were written to be read and performed on the radio. Now, when it was my turn to do the book cover, I was finding it very difficult to find a photograph that would be appropriate for the cover. As you can see, it was a family that she invented just for the radio plays. So the entire book is about this family, and that particular family came to be known as the Radio Family. There was a mother, a father, there was a cook, there were children, and every week there was an episode about their lives. Very stereotypical family going through a certain period in the history of Austria, and through them and through their adventures, through their outings, through their dialogues, through the people who came to meet them, Bachmann was kind of investigating, exploring, and often exposing the mental attitudes of the time. Now, I tried very hard to locate some kind of a photograph that would be of the correct era and of the correct time as it was described in this book. But it was very, very difficult for me to locate a photograph like that. So I came up with the idea of using these little icons. Some of you will recognize they are freely available on the internet. Some of these are also available, in fact, in your computers in a typeface called Wingdings. Some of you may, when you have finished listening to this lecture, you can go back and look at your computers. So I have just pulled out little icons from each play. So if you are looking at the back cover, you'll notice there's a man, there's a woman, there's a clock, there's a sofa, there's a radio itself, there is food, there are paintings, photographs, all kinds of little motifs that indicate the subject matter. The picture of a little Mona Lisa in a red circle is because one day they go to the museum, so that indicates the museum visit. There's a picture of two shopping bags, that's because the mother and the daughter go shopping for Christmas one day and various things happen to them in the shop. There is a picture of an army medal. The army medal is there because somebody in the family is a soldier who fought in the war, and so on and so forth. Now, often in book publishing, we tend to design the book cover first, the front cover of the book first. So I did the front cover showing the father and the mother, the man and the woman icons, as you can see. Then there is the radio, And there is a picture of a sofa to indicate that when the radio play went live every perhaps Sunday evening or Sunday morning, the entire family got together, sat on the sofa, and they listened to the radio play about the radio family. That is all that I wanted to indicate on the front cover. I have used two primary colors, or let's say three. There is a sort of aquamarine, there is an off-white, and there is a chocolate brown, and there is a little accent with red right at the bottom of the cover. Later, when the book was ready for publication, then I had to do the rest of the jacket. This thing that you see spread out in front of you is the artwork. The formal term is artwork. The artwork for a hardback book's jacket. Even more formally, it is called the dust jacket because it is meant to protect the cloth-bound version of the book, the cloth-bound hardbacked version of the book from gathering dust. The panel on the extreme right is known as the front flap. It has a write-up on what the book is about. Many of you will be familiar if you have gone book shopping, you've picked up a hardback, you tend to open the book and you want to read what is the book all about. Then coming back from there is the front cover. Then of course we have the center. The thin strip in the center is the book's spine, which is what you can see when the book is on the bookshelf. Then we have the back cover, and right at the end the red color has been picked out as a highlight and is used on the back flap. Now the reason why I'm sharing this dust jacket with you is because it has what I would call design unity. It's quirky enough, it's a little different enough with the use of the 4 icons in the front, and yet it all holds together. The same kind of visual treatment occurs on the spine, the same kind of visual treatment occurs on the back cover, the same typeface has been used on both the flaps, and the same color scheme is maintained right through. So you can tell it has all been done by one person. It has all been thought of as one entire spread that will wrap the book. Every bit of the jacket has some connection either through color or through typeface with each other part. They are not absolutely disparate objects that have suddenly been brought together and look like they have been made by different people. Okay, so this is a very good example of design unity. We will examine the next principle now, which of course we had talked a little bit about in our first lecture, and that is space. Many graphic designers are very terrified of space, especially when it appears on book covers. There is an overwhelming instinct or some kind of nervousness to fill every single millimeter of space. I am here to tell you that there is no oppressive need to do so. All graphic design needs some spaces for the eye to rest, for the eye to dwell. Space often enhances a visual. In a very big space, if you have a very tiny visual, it in fact emphasizes the beauty of that particular visual. This is with reference to the covers. Sometimes, because of the pressures of cost, we have to cut back on how generous we are with space when we are dealing with the inside of the book, when we are dealing with the pages. You may begin to design a book with very generous margins, but then you realize that the number of pages is increasing beyond what has been planned for that book, which means that book will become much more expensive when it is time to be produced, in which case you revisit your design, and then one of the main ways to cut back on that extra pagination is to slowly start reducing the margins, the space between paragraphs, the space between the lines, how much the display title has dropped from the top of the page, etc. Space has meaning on a page, space lets the eye breathe, space indicates importance of text of one level from text of another level, and is a great, great useful instrument in the hands of an intelligent graphic designer. My request would be, don't rush to fill every single centimeter of space. White space is good. Sometimes very effective design has also been created with negative space. Often the more space you don't use on a page, then the clearer your page becomes. As you can see, this entire slide is dedicated to the word space, and I have deliberately designed it in such a way that the medium has become the message. The slide itself is telling you the whole point of the use of space. The next slide is going to show you a few cover designs where space has been used to just let the title breathe, the visual breathe. There is no rush to fill up the covers with extra material. There is no nervousness of the fact that these covers are white and that there is a lot of breathing space around them. On the left, you see one which is called Stigmata of Bliss, where the visual comes in a little strip. The next one is a slightly right aligned cover design of a book called Mokusei, where there is a Japanese connection to this particular book. So as you can see, there is a Japanese painting that is enclosed in the circle. The one on the top right is a book called Solitary. The book is actually about solitary imprisonment, confinement, and the effect that it has on people and their minds. So you can see that little black square right in the middle and a very, very tiny lock. It has deliberately been kept as a contrast to the title. Rather than the darkness of solitary confinement, there is a contrast with the light outside. And on the lower right hand side, you have some I. Alan Seeley, the very famous writer's China sketchbook. He had once paid a visit to China and he had kept like a traveling journal, and this is a facsimile of that particular book. And all of these covers are a celebration of white space, and in fact the space itself is an element of design rather than the visuals that are filling it up. All of these have been based on the principle that white space is good, white space enhances typeface, enhances the beauty of the visuals, and that we should not be nervous about filling it up. These have colored empty areas. You might be thinking that white space is quite literally white space. It is not. White space is the idea of emptiness, is the idea of blank areas deliberately left so on a cover. On the left hand side, we have the blue Max Frisch journal. As you can see, it is a journal. Again, these are reproductions, translations of his notebooks. And I have used just a strip of the calendar to indicate that these books are effectively like his daily diaries, and the rest of it has been left blank. The Romila Thapa cover also is a slightly top-heavy cover. Most of the visuals and the type treatment are coming towards the top. The bottom has been left just to breathe because the visual motifs are quite large here. And if you look at the other two, these are two of my own favorite covers. There's a cover called Bliss, which is about a woman finding love and falling in love, and you can see her two hands raised in ecstasy, and the rest of it is just the blue of the sky. And at the bottom is a novel called Life in Peacetime, where a man has a sort of severe existential crisis while he's flying up in the aeroplane. And you can see the aeroplane is there right at the bottom, just on top of the title, and the rest of the book is the vastness of the sky, which could be interpreted as the vastness of the life that he's looking back at. It could be, it could be interpreted in a variety of ways. But these particular book covers are also utilizing space in a very interesting way. So white space doesn't necessarily have to be white in color. White space refers to a certain kind of emptiness within which the design dwells and is sort of balanced or enhanced by the space that you leave around it. Of course, we cannot have a discussion of good design or graphic design without a discussion of color. The conscious use of color to create hierarchy, dominance, and balance in a design can be very effective. This goes without saying. Hierarchy is levels of importance. In the visual world, hierarchy refers to what is the most important thing that I see on the cover, right? One must be consistent with the use of color, which can be achieved if the designer limits the use of color choices to only a few. Using many colors in a design would be like using many different font types. It leads to a messy and very confusing piece of work. Often, when I am working with a colored image, the colors that I then choose for the lettering on the cover, for the title, subtitle, name of the author, etc., all of these I take from the image itself. If it is a colored image, it already has colors in it. That determines the color palette for my work, rather than trying to find other colors that then either clash or contrast with the colors on the image. It all may end up looking very busy. It may then result in an unreadable cover, and the reader will simply just turn their eyes and move on to something else. Please make your color choices at the beginning of the design process rather than at the end. You must know what you are designing. Is there a company logo from which you can take the colors? Is there a color image from which you can take the colors? Or are you maybe perhaps just designing in black and white? Does the story that you are interpreting have colors in it? Etc., etc. These are considerations that obviously, as you can imagine, must be made at the beginning and not at the end of the creative process. Good color use can help guide the viewer's eyes through the design by highlighting elements which are most important, which is what I have done on this very slide as an example for all of you. What I have highlighted in red is the most important parts of every point and every sentence, and no doubt when you are looking at it from a distance among all the black text, you will hopefully be looking at the red ones even before you finish reading the rest of it. When it comes to color, color can provide direction, and you may look up, although I will have later a lecture on color, warm colors bring elements forward, cool colors, so it makes them look like they're going to leap to the eye, and cool colors move elements back. Okay, this is an optical illusion, and this is why it is so useful to have a sound working knowledge of how color works and how colors work with or against each other. When it comes to color use, one thing is quite clear, that the benefits of color use quickly diminish when too many colors are applied to a design. You can see the very last line of this slide, which is very annoying to read. It's too much. The colors are not working with each other. They are not even working with the background. I would much rather prefer the rest of this particular slide, which is just working with black and red against the very pale green that I have used. So again, never too many colors and never too many typefaces. Here I have for you two book covers. One of them, the one on the left, is a book that has been translated from the Norwegian. It is a book by a very, very famous Norwegian author called Thorvald Steen, and this particular book is called The White Bathing Hut. Now, often when I design a cover, I am designing the visual part of it first, but I am never, and not even for a moment, forgetting that ultimately that book cover and that visual will have to coexist with text. If I don't put text on the book cover, then that is not a book cover. It is just a painting or a collage or a visual. A book cover is made up of image as well as text. We have to say who the book is about, who the book is by, and we have to give at least, at the very least, the title of the book. Often there may be more than one author, there may be a subtitle, etc., etc. So here, when I first did the illustration based on elements of the story, when it was time for me to do the type treatment for this cover, then I drew upon the colors from the visuals that I had put on the cover itself. As you can all see, the pale greens, the slight oranges, the little bit of the blue, the sea green, all of it exists in the seashell above, in the seashell below. There is a starfish at the bottom of the page. The sea plays a particular part in this novel, which is why we have done this particular visual. And this is therefore both different, but still has unity of design. And as I have said before, one way of preserving the unity is through intelligent and restrained color use. The second one has even fewer colors. It has brown as the base. It's a book of beautiful poems by a German poet called Volker Braun. The book is called Rubble Flora Selected Poems. I did the flowers first, flowers growing in the rubble. You can see the bits and pieces of rubble in the yellow and the grey dots at the base of the flowers. And I have used the colors of the visual in the text. So just that shade of yellow has been picked out. I have not used the red for any of the text, because this particular shade of red will not be readable against this brown when it appears on the letters. The letters are thinner and finer than the flowers. The flowers are quite bold. so they are able to take the red well, but the typography is quite slender, quite fine. The type will not be able to support the red, they will just disappear against the background. The yellow is much brighter and more readable, and you all know that white is a neutral color and goes with everything. So yellow has been used in this cover, mirroring the yellow put on the base of the flowers, and the title remains in white. Please also note the center alignment. Alignment is a very important tool in graphic design. The top of the central flower is dictating more or less the central alignment of this book cover's typographic treatment, and that is very, very important, again also contributing to the unity of design. The next principle that I would like to discuss with all of you is a principle called dominance. Dominance is essentially the same idea as contrast, and as you can see, deliberately I have used white space here to create a giant white circle, so that even though the slide has a lot of text on it, the slide is dominated by the white circle. So the principle of dominance comes into effect right here, whether you want to or not, and even though it's only an empty white circle, more often than not, you will in fact look at the white circle before reading the text. I have also played a little bit of a visual game with you, so that the word dominance, which should have been the caption of this slide, is in the smallest typeface. And even though it is considerably smaller than all the other typeface, it will still draw your eye. So sometimes graphic designers play little visual games with their readers and establish a bit of a connection, even though they are not present when the viewer is watching their designs. Okay? Dominance is essentially the same idea as contrast. You can create contrast on a page in many ways. You can contrast color, you can contrast size, shape, etc. If one item in a design is clearly dominant, this helps the viewer get the point of the design. If all the items in a design are of equal weight and nothing is clearly dominant, then it is difficult for the viewer to know where to begin. For example, if the name of the author and the title of the book are in the same font size and the same color, the reader will be totally confused about which is which, and they will not be able to read the cover. So when you design a page, when you design a slide, when you design a poster, you have to ask yourself what is most important. Is the name of the musician more important than the name of the event? Is the name of the musician and the name of the event more important than the date, the time of the event? What do I want the reader to look at first? Right? On the Thorvald Steen cover, I have deliberately come back to this particular slide because on the Thorvald Steen cover, he is such a well-known individual, he's such a well-known writer. His name is in all caps and is the first thing that you see. It is the most prominent, the most dominant part of this design. And when you come to the Fokker Brown cover, of course, the red flower is very important. The red flower is dominating, but I have left enough empty space to create an illusion of importance with Fokker Brown very near the top of the book's cover. It is in yellow. It is much more gentle than the presence of the red flower, but because it's in yellow, it's a brighter color, it's near the top of the cover, so you do very much notice the name of the author, even though you would imagine that the flower is the more dominating element. Here we have several book covers where color, shape and/or size is helping create dominant. Now on the left hand side on the cover that says Herbert, a lot of the visual excitement on that particular cover is happening towards the right. The left has blank area that has been deliberately created so that we can put there the name of the author and the name of the novel and the name of the translator. Okay, the empty space was first created deliberately as a placeholder for the text. Nabarun Bhattacharya is a very, very important Bengali writer, and we wanted his name to be very prominently displayed on the cover, but we also wanted a visually exciting cover, so image and text are being allowed to coexist in this way in the same place without either of them losing out to each other. On the second one, on the second central purple book cover, it is a book of poems by a gentleman called Salah al-Hamdani. The book is called Baghdad Adieu. Salai is not very well known throughout the world, especially in English translation. So I wanted to put in fact a poem on the cover itself to tempt people into opening the book and reading more. But if I had that poem on the cover in white, in the same white that I have used for the author's name and title, it would distract from the title. So deliberately, I have allowed the dominance through the stark use of white in the author's name and in the title and in the translator's name, and the poem that I want you to read has been used in a very subdued color so that it exists but it doesn't compete. And the white, which is a stark contrast against the background purple, is saved to give dominance where it ideally belongs, which is the name of the book and the name of the author. The other two covers over here, again you can see a lavender lilac shade on top. Very important, I have given massive and sort of total dominance to the title of the book, which is a title called Love. Typographically, it is huge. You can see it from a distance. This kind of very big, very large typographic treatment is being favored by most publishers these days because everyone is worried about their books being legible as thumbnails on the Amazon pages or on online book selling sites, where you will only see a little string of covers appearing at the bottom of the screen, and if your type treatment is very tiny, then readers are unable to tell what that book cover is all about, and they may pass the book by and not stop to wonder or buy it. So here there is typographic dominance, and the book underneath it, the book cover, is a book cover called Panopticon, which is about a certain 360-degree view of the world, a certain kind of visual system, and I have tried to capture that. I have deliberately led, dominance has been given to the word Panopticon, and all the other elements from the chapters, chapter titles, names, etc. follow. Balance is also another guiding principle of design. If a design is out of balance, the individual elements will dominate the overall design. A well-balanced design has a clear, single, unified message. There are three types of balance: symmetrical, asymmetrical, and mosaic. Balance basically refers to the ratio, the sizes, and the positions of the objects with which you are constructing your design. Symmetrical balance is vertically centered and is equal on either sides. Asymmetrical designs are more informal and dynamic with a variety of sizes and shapes, etc. Mosaic designs usually have far too much information. This kind of balance often lacks consistency and hierarchy and is very, very hard to read. I'm going to show you some examples now that will make it very easy for you to understand. This particular slide is a slide and a very, very elementary example and a very basic example that we are all used to of symmetrical balance. As you can see, you can imagine the book being folded down the middle, and these two white areas on either side are showing you where the text will come. Equal two blocks on either side, two blocks of text that you will read. Equally balanced, perfectly balanced in fact. The next one is asymmetrical balance. Asymmetrical balance, as you can see, they still occupy the same. The reading area that the eye needs to traverse is the same, but the distribution of matter within that reading area has been broken up into shapes and sizes to just create a sense of variety, right? The page on the left remaining the same, the page on the right has more interesting breakups, and this is basically a disaster. This is extremely annoying to look at. Your eye does not know what to look at first, it doesn't know what to look at second. This is an example of mosaic balance. This is very distracting, this is very distressing. It just, I can think of no word for it other than chaos. Please try and have some sense of unity, some sense of balance, some kind of a the margin that you follow can either, the line that you follow can either come down this way vertically or it can come horizontally, but try and think of an imaginary grid into which you are putting all your elements, no matter how disparate they are, because believe it or not, they do affect the reading process and the sense of whether we are receiving at all any information from a design or not. We are often, and I have already in my first lecture as well as in this one, I have discussed hierarchy constantly. It is very important to remember hierarchy with regard to position, hierarchy with regard to text levels, and as you can see here, what is most important is the question that we have to keep asking ourselves as designers when we are approaching a design. Is it the image on a cover or on a page that is most important? Is it the title that is even more important? Is it the line of text announcing an event in the case of a poster, or the author's name that is more important? Sometimes an author's name is the most important, and you will remember, you have seen this and you will continue to see this often in the case of a 5-star author, a very prominent personality, maybe even a musician doing a concert, a very prominent and very well known respected scholar or professor coming to give a lecture. The poster, the event announcement, the book cover leads with the name of the personality, right? And everything else follows, because the most important thing about that event, the most important thing about the book is the person who is either going to be giving that lecture or is the person who has written that book. So automatically it is decided that the most important, in fact the unique selling point of that particular thing that you are designing is the personality. So the name of the person then immediately becomes the most important, the largest thing to be appearing on the graphic design. The next question is, what is it? Then comes the name of the book, or then comes the name of the event. Where is it or when is it? Therefore follows the time, the date, the location, etc., and or the name of anybody else who has contributed to that book. So often these are the kind of decisions that have been taken. They have been taken in order to publicize an event as much as possible. They have been taken to draw as many people to the book as possible, and we have to keep them in mind whether we agree with this decision or not, and therefore when we design, we have to design accordingly. Hierarchy creates a visual organization to a design and gives the reader an idea of where to begin and where to finish reading. On this very slide itself, hierarchy has been established with actually not the first line, but the second line, which is the largest typographically and which asks you the question, what is most important? And then almost like an eye test, as you can see, the typographic differences have come until the last 2 lines are in fact very tiny. So automatically I have guided your eye about what to look at first and what to look at second and third and so on. Over here on these 2 particular book covers, you can see how hierarchy has been created. Again, we have the use of color and just placement. Come take a gentle stab is a very mysterious, very intriguing name for a book. It is in fact a book of poems, but we just want to attract you to the book with that very mysterious title, so it has been put right on top. Selected Poems is in a slightly smaller typeface because that is almost like a subhead, and then we have the name of the poet, which is Salim Barakat, right? On the right hand side is the first translation of short stories by a very, very significant, very important Hindi writer who unfortunately died very young. His name is Rajkamal Chaudhary. Now, even though it has a very exuberant visual treatment, I have highlighted, I've created dominance, I've created hierarchy by putting in the middle of all this exuberant color, I have deliberately put a white label behind the author's name so that it leaps to the eye, so that he gets his due importance in the English world, so that on the cover, while you are also looking at the snake and the cat and the dog and whatever else it is that there is, elements that have been pulled out from the stories, you can't ignore the white strip on top which holds the author's name. So dominance can be established through color, dominance can be established through position, as can hierarchy, and it is not important that either of these things need to be very large in size in order to be established, right? Alignment is very important, and all designs, in order to achieve unity, in order to achieve the balance that I have been talking about, use alignment with great care. You can have left aligned text, you can have right aligned text, you can have center aligned text. Depending on the alignment of the text, you can place the rest of your page architecture. Depending on the alignment of those, you can decide how and where to put your pictures as and when they appear inside the book. Please, please bear this in mind. Alignment creates a sharper, more unified design. It is one of the most basic but most important principles of design, as it allows our eyes to see order. Order which is very comforting to a reader. When you are reading a book, you don't want to be jostled into unfamiliar territory constantly. You want some visual surprise, but within a solid framework where you are dwelling while you are reading that book. You don't want to keep grouping for information. You don't want to be unsure. You don't want to see a picture caption and not be able to figure out what it is because the typeface is confusing you. You don't want to come to the end of a chapter and then not be able to tell whether the chapter has ended or not. You want to be able to tell where one paragraph stops and where the other starts, right? Alignment helps all of this. Having a strong point of alignment within design allows our eyes to flow through the visual message, aligning elements with one another so that every item has a visual connection with something else on the page, tightens a design and eliminates a messy effect which comes from the random placement. When I talk of alignment, try and remember the slide that I showed you of the mosaic balance where nothing was aligned to anything else and therefore it created a sense of tremendous confusion. Aligning elements which are not in close proximity with each other can provide an invisible connection, communicating the idea that they belong to the same piece. I have here an example from the internet where the alignment has been used very, very beautifully. The two sheets are obviously, as you can tell, sheets from a menu from a restaurant, and just look at how beautifully the two picture boxes are appearing, the two large picture boxes appearing, and how cleverly they have used this. The small boxes on the right hand side are capturing the different ingredients that go into each main dish. Please look at how the dominance has been created. First, you see the picture of the dish. The next biggest piece of typeface is the name of the food, the name of the dish. Then you have, after a gap in italics, you have the name of the ingredients. And then, I'm sorry I can't read this particular language, but what seems to be a description of how it is prepared. Then you have, I think, wine suggestions at the bottle, by the glass, etc., etc. They're coming at the bottom. The wines have been paired to the food. Look at the beautiful alignment that comes with, on the right hand side, with the prices of the food item, the prices of the wines. All of the prices are aligned with each other. They are in turn aligned to the outer edge of the boxes, right? So this page is a really, really beautiful. All the text is aligned to the outer edge of the big box. All the prices are aligned to the outer edges of the little boxes. The reading area that the eye has to navigate, that the eye has to negotiate, is very, very, very clear. You don't even have to make an effort to read these two pages. They really are very beautifully, very simply designed. When good design is done well, when it works, that is when you don't notice it. When you look at these pages, you get the feeling that they could have only been done like this. There is no other option in the way these pictures and these texts could have been represented on the page. Dominance has been created, there is unity, there is text hierarchy, colors have been kept to a minimum. Because the photographs and the ingredients are so colorful themselves, further color does not require, is not needed to be added to any of the text. And even though this is from the menu of a restaurant in a foreign country and in a language that I cannot read, I am not, and I'm hoping you are not, having any difficulty in understanding what each level of image or visual or text stands for, right? Here we have two posters that I had designed. One was for a symposium and the other was for a lecture series, but they were like a twin event. So you can see that deliberately there is a sort of, in publishing terms, we would call this a series look, right? Similar elements slightly played around with, but they convey the very, very clear idea that these two events are part of one bigger whole, that they are somehow connected. It's possible even if you see the symposium poster in one location and the lecture series poster in another location, the elements, the visual, the similarity in the visual elements will help you connect in your mind that, oh, I see the symposium and the lecture series are actually like a pair, okay? And if you look here, there is a combination of alignments over here. If I'm hoping that the screen is zooming in, the biggest and the most important part is the title of the symposium and the title of the lecture series, following which you have a little subtitle. Those two are white, those two are connected to the visual. That is what you will in fact see first. Then you have the hierarchy. You have a little paragraph that explains. You have the dates and the times. Please note the orange man. The orange man is a fairly prominent visual element on the top of the page, and the rest of the poster picks up on that orange, right? So the color scheme was present in the visual itself, and I have just isolated one particular shade and used it as my highlight color throughout this particular series of posters. We come back to a central alignment towards the bottom, which explains what is happening where. Repetition is one of also very important, and as you saw with repetition right over here, as you can repeat, the orange color is being repeated, the crow is being repeated, different parts of the visual, the typeface is being repeated to create a sense of unity. So repetition in design is very important, especially in multiple page documents. Repetition, of course, gives rise to patterns. One of my favorite example of when I talk of repetition is to actually look at anything in nature, whether it's the feathers of birds or it's the hides of animals, every leaf, every butterfly, they have the most miraculous natural occurrence of repetition and therefore pattern making, and they are really, really very beautiful, and they help you identify things better, they help create unity. Repetition also helps create balance. Here I have for you two book series that I have designed. Repetition is very, very important in publishing terms when we are designing what we call a series look. And here you can see on the left 12 books by Jean-Paul Sartre. On the right there are about 9 books from different French authors. The titles are changing. In some cases the pictures are changing, but all the other elements are being repeated. Typefaces being repeated, decorative motifs are being repeated, certain colors are deliberately being repeated. This helps through difference. Repetition helps create unity, helps create an identity. I hope that these things that I have discussed today and that I will in fact keep coming back to over my subsequent lectures are helping you slowly formulate your ideas of what it takes to be and to do good graphic design, especially for print publications.
Hi, my name is Gillette Sam, and I teach sociology at IIT Kanpur. Today I'm going to tell you about the different characteristics of the movement of things around the world that are associated with globalization. We refer to these kind of movements as global flows. Now, the concept of global flows is quite important, and it's important for us to understand the different ways in which these flows might occur. Now, typically, when people talk about the movement of things from one place to another in the context of globalization, they're under the misconception that things tend to flow from abroad into the place where they are living. Uh, in a very sort of stereotypical manner, there is this idea that with globalization, much of the movement that occurs is from Western countries into non-Western countries. Now, as sociologists, we know that actually global flows are multidirectional. So, which means that as much as there is a movement of flows from Western countries into non-Western countries, there is an equal amount of movement of flows from one non-Western country to another non-Western country, and in fact, a movement of flows from non-Western countries into Western countries as well. Let's take the example of food, for instance. You may be aware of a type of food which originated actually in China and then goes on to Japan, called ramen. For instance, the popular brand Top Ramen that is consumed in India is an example of ramen. Now, ramen, initially the movement is from China, which is a non-Western country, to Japan, which is another non-Western country. From Japan, this very popular food item travels to Western countries, such as the US, and also more recently to countries in Europe. So there you have a movement from a non-Western country to a Western country. And in fact, now we have very specific types of ramen being consumed in metropolitan centers in India as well. So there's another movement from a Western country to a non-Western country, which is India. So global flows in that sense are multidirectional. A second aspect of global flows is that they could be interconnected. An easy way to think about this would be if you have relatives who are traveling from the US or the UK or Australia, very often you'll see that people request them to carry electronic items with them. They say, oh, can you please get me a laptop, or can you please get me the specific camera lens that I'm looking for. So here you see that the movement of people, which is a person moving from one country to another country, is connected to the movement of technological items as well. So global flows in that sense are interconnected with each other. A third characteristic of global flows is that we could see that they happen in reverse. In fact, they are called reverse global flows. An example of a reverse global flow would be a style of music that you may be very well acquainted with, which is Bhangra. Now, Bhangra music is something that originated, as we know, in the state of Punjab. Now, as you know, Punjab is also a state which has seen a lot of out-migration, not only to other parts of India, but also to other parts of the world. So as people migrated to other parts of the world, they took their music with them. So when people migrated from Punjab to the UK, for instance, they hung on to the music that they were familiar with. So Bhangra moved from little villages in Punjab to the major cities where people from Punjab settled to in the UK. While in the UK, over subsequent generations, this music was transformed. It was not only performed in its original version, but it was also performed with the addition of many different types of beats, which are more familiar to people in the UK. At one point in time, you see that this modified form of Bhangra comes back to India. We're talking about the 1990s, the 2000s. So here you see that that a form of music that originated in India moves out of India to the UK. It is modified a little and then comes back to become extremely popular in India again. So in some ways, this form of music is returning to where it started out, but in a slightly changed manner. We call this kind of movement as a reverse flow.
I am A.K. Sharma and I am Professor of Sociology at IIT Kanpur. The question I am going to address is what is urbanization? Urbanization is essentially the process of population concentration, which means that if more people start living in a smaller number of places, or if the distribution of population becomes more unequal, like more people living in places like Bombay, Calcutta, Mexico, then we say that the urbanization is taking place. Essentially, it means increase in percentage of population living in areas or localities which are defined as urban. Urbanization is a new phenomenon, of course, a post-industrial phenomenon. About 200 years ago, hardly 5% population of the world lived in urban areas, and today more than 50% population of the world is living in urban areas or localities which are classified as urban. You will be happy to know that according to 2011 census of India, in our own country for the first time, increase in the urban population has been greater than the increase in the rural population. Though India is not so urban as the developed countries, and about 31% population of India only is living in urban areas. We can believe that in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years time, India will also be more urban, at least more urban than what it is. It may not be 80%, but certainly it will be 35% or 40%. Now, how is this urban locality defined? Because this definition of locality as urban or rural is crucial to measure level of urbanization. I will give you definition of our own country. In Indian census, an urban locality is defined in two ways. There are statutory towns and there are census towns. All places with municipality, municipal corporation, cantonment or notified town area committees are called urban. This is statutory definition. According to demographic definition, there are three main criteria. If a locality has more than 5,000 people or 75% of male labor force is engaged in non-agricultural activities, or the density of population is 400 per square kilometer or 1000 per square mile, then we say that the locality may be classified as urban. There are many other additions to this definition. Now, we have the concept of urban agglomeration and many other things, but essentially this is how urban population is defined in India. And as I said that urbanization is associated with economic development and industrialization, same is the case with India. About 100 years ago in India, only 11% people were living in urban areas. Today 31% are living in urban areas, and this is obviously linked with economic development of the country, growth of per capita income and industrialization. I remember that in one 5-year plan it was mentioned that today this urban population can grow by way of natural increase of births minus deaths in the urban areas itself or through rural to urban migration. Today, nearly 60% contribution to growth of urban population is due to rural to urban migration, and this is going to increase. This is essentially what urbanization means. Urbanization means growth of population in localities defined as urban in relation to population of localities defined as rural, and I have given you Indian definition. Thank you very much.